I'm Ava, 28 female. I live alone in a city about 2 hours away from my childhood home, working as a senior financial analyst, a job I fought hard to get. For years, my life was a careful balance of building my own future while being the financial backstop for my family. This is the story of how a $3,500 prom dress became the final straw that broke a lifetime of toxic family dynamics, forcing me to choose between their demands and my own survival. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The call came on a Tuesday evening, right as I was unwinding from a grueling day of quarterly reports. The caller ID flashed Mom, and I felt that familiar knot tighten in my stomach. It was never just a call to say hello. It was always a prelude to a request, a gentle probing of my financial stability before the ask. I let out a slow breath, squared my shoulders, and answered with a forced cheerfulness. "Hey, Mom, how's everything?" "Ava, honey, I'm so glad I caught you," she began, her voice a little too sweet. "How was work? Are you eating properly?" We went through the usual script. I assured her I was fine, that work was busy but manageable, and yes, I had eaten a sensible dinner. These were the toll booths I had to pass through before getting to the real reason for the call. After about 5 minutes of small talk, she finally got to it. "So, you know your sister's senior prom is coming up in a few weeks," she said, her tone shifting from casual to cautiously optimistic. "Of course," I said. "I'm sure Chloe is excited." "Oh, she's ecstatic. But honey, things are, well, you know. Your father's hours have been a bit unpredictable, and with everything being so expensive these days." She let the sentence trail off, a well-practiced bit of emotional bait. I knew this dance. I'd been leading it since I got my first real job. "What's going on, Mom?" "Well, Chloe has her heart set on a specific experience for prom. It's her big night, Ava, her one and only senior prom. She wants it to be perfect, a memory she'll cherish forever." I braced myself. My sister Chloe's definition of perfect was usually spelled MONEY. She was 10 years younger than me, and my parents had raised her in a completely different reality. I was the child of their struggling early years, the one who wore hand-me-downs and understood that "we can't afford it" was a complete sentence. Chloe was the child of their more stable, two-income years, the one who never heard the word no. She had been conditioned to believe that her wants were needs, and that my salary was a family resource. "Okay," I said slowly, trying to keep my voice neutral. "What does she need?" My mom took a deep breath, the sound crackling over the phone. "She's put together a little budget. It's very reasonable, she thinks. She found the most beautiful designer dress, Ava. It's like something out of a fairy tale. And of course, there are the shoes, the professional hair and makeup, the ticket itself, her share of the limousine with her friends, and the pre-prom dinner at that fancy steakhouse downtown. And they all want to get a hotel suite for the after-party to be safe instead of driving around." The knot in my stomach was now a cold, heavy stone. I could hear the cash register ringing with every item she listed. "And what's the total on this reasonable budget?" There was a slight hesitation before she said the number, a number I'm sure she had practiced saying in a way that made it sound smaller than it was. "It's only $3,500. I was silent. I literally had no words. $3,500 for a high school dance. The silence stretched, becoming uncomfortable. I could hear my mom's nervous breathing on the other end. "Ava, are you there?" "I'm here," I finally managed to say, my voice flat. "Mom, that's an insane amount of money for a prom." My first car, a beat-up but reliable sedan that got me through college, cost less than that. My entire security deposit and first month's rent on my first apartment was less than that. "It's not insane if you think about what it's for," she countered, her voice hardening slightly, the sweetness evaporating. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime event. All of her friends are doing it. Do you want Chloe to be the only one who feels left out, the only one whose family couldn't give her a special night?" The emotional blackmail was so textbook it was almost laughable. It was a tactic they had honed to perfection over the years. My success was not my own. It was a resource to be used to shield Chloe from any form of disappointment or reality. I had paid for her summer camps, her expensive sports equipment, her first laptop, and a significant portion of her car. Each time, it was presented as an emergency, a necessity for her development. And happiness. Each time I had caved, telling myself it was easier than fighting, that it was what a good daughter and sister did. Mom, I understand she wants a nice night, but $3,500 is more than my mortgage payment. I can't just pull that kind of money out of thin air. Oh, come on, Ava, she scoffed. We know what you make. You're a financial analyst. You're smart with money. This is nothing for you. You probably spend that much on a vacation. The assumption stung. I didn't take lavish vacations. I was diligently saving for a down payment on a house, maxing out my retirement accounts, and trying to build a secure future for myself. A future no one else was going to build for me. They saw my responsible financial habits not as a sign of discipline, but as proof that I had a massive surplus of disposable income just waiting to be spent on their whims. Whether I have it or not isn't the point, I said, my voice gaining a bit of an edge. The point is that it's an unreasonable amount to spend on a party. There are beautiful dresses that don't cost $1,000. There are ways to have a beautiful, memorable prom for a fraction of that cost. So you're saying no? The question was sharp, accusatory. You're refusing to help your own sister. I'm not refusing to help, I clarified, trying to de-escalate. I'm happy to contribute a reasonable amount. I can give her $300 towards her dress or the ticket. That's a very generous gift. There was a cold laugh on the other end. $300? Ava, that might cover the cost of her shoes if she gets them on sale. Don't insult her. This is a package deal. It's all or nothing. She needs the full amount to make her dream come true. The phrase package deal set off alarm bells. It wasn't about helping out. It was about funding a specific, pre-packaged fantasy. It was a demand, not a request. And the implication was clear. My love and support were measured by my willingness to meet that demand without question. For the first time, the sheer audacity of it all cut through the years of guilt and obligation. I was tired. I was tired of being the family ATM. Tired of my own financial goals being treated as secondary to my sister's fleeting desires. Mom, I said, my voice firm and clear. The answer is no. I will not be paying $3,500 for Chloe's prom. The silence that followed was heavier than before. It wasn't a nervous silence, it was a cold, ominous one. I had just broken the unspoken rule of our family. I had said no to Chloe. I see, my mother said, her voice dripping with ice. I'll have to tell your father you said that. We'll talk later. The line went dead. I stood in my quiet apartment, the phone still pressed to my ear, the dial tone buzzing. I knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The "we'll talk later" was not a promise, it was a threat. The full court press was coming, and I had a sinking feeling it was going to be uglier than anything I had ever dealt with before. I had just bought a ticket to a family war, and the opening battle was over. The retaliatory strike didn't take long. Less than an hour after my mother hung up on me, my father called. His approach was always different from my mother's. Where she used guilt and emotional manipulation, he used brute force and intimidation. He was the enforcer. Ava, he said, his voice a low growl. There was no preamble, no "how are you?" Your mother told me you're refusing to help Chloe with her prom. Hi, Dad, I said, my voice tight. I didn't refuse to help. I refused to pay an absurd amount of money. I offered to contribute $300. He let out a short, harsh laugh. $300? What is she supposed to do with that? That's a slap in the face. She's your sister, for crying out loud, your only sister. And she's your daughter, I shot back, a surge of adrenaline sharpening my tongue. Why is her prom suddenly my sole financial responsibility? This was a departure from my usual strategy. Normally, I would try to be diplomatic, to explain my position calmly. But their coordinated attack, the sheer entitlement of it all, had pushed me past that point. I wasn't going to be a doormat anymore. "Don't you get smart with me," he snapped. "We've done everything for you. We supported you through college, we helped you get on your feet." It was a gross exaggeration. They had co-signed on my initial student loans, loans that I had been paying off meticulously without any help since graduation. But that was the extent of their support. I had worked 2 jobs all through college to pay for my rent, my books, and my living expenses. Any help they had given me since then had been repaid tenfold through my funding of Chloe's extravagant lifestyle. "I am grateful for what you've done," I said, choosing my words carefully. "And I have shown that gratitude time and time again. I've paid for countless things for Chloe over the years, but this is different. This is no tea and need, it's an indulgence, a $3,500 indulgence. It's about family, Ava, it's about being there for each other," he boomed. "You have the money, it's not a hardship for you. Your mother and I are stretched thin. We're doing our best. You're the one in a position to make this happen for her. It's your duty." The word duty hung in the air between us. My duty, in their eyes, was to be the successful child who funneled her resources back into the family unit, specifically towards the favored child. My own life, my own dreams, were secondary. I was the investment, and Chloe was the one who got to enjoy the returns. "My duty is to myself and my own future, Dad," I said, my voice shaking slightly but holding firm. "I am saving for a house. I am planning for my future. I cannot and will not jeopardize that for a one-night party." "A house," he scoffed. "You're 28, you don't need a house right now, you have a perfectly good apartment. Your sister only gets to be a senior once. These are the priorities, Ava, family first." It was a twisted logic I could no longer accept. My long-term financial security versus her short-term social fantasy. In their minds, there was no contest. "We disagree on what family first means," I replied. "To me, it doesn't mean one child is forced to sacrifice for the other's every whim." He was silent for a moment, and I knew he was regrouping, preparing for the final, nuclear option. They had used it once before, years ago, when I had considered taking a job offer on the other side of the country. The threat had been so terrifying then that I had backed down and taken a lesser job just to stay within a few hours' drive. "All right," he said, his voice dangerously calm. "Here's how it's going to be. You're part of this family and you have an obligation. You will pay for your sister's prom, the full amount. If you don't, if you choose your money over your own flesh and blood, then you can consider yourself no longer a part of this family." There it was. The ultimatum, the emotional guillotine they held over my head. Pay up or you're an orphan. No more holidays, no more phone calls, no more pretense of being a family. "Don't come to Christmas," he continued, spelling it out so there could be no misunderstanding. "Don't call your mother on her birthday. Don't expect us at your wedding if you ever have one. If Chloe is not important enough for you to help, then we are not important enough for you to have. Pay for the prom or you're out. It's that simple." My heart was pounding in my chest. I felt a wave of nausea. A few years ago, those words would have shattered me. The thought of being cut off, of being truly alone, was my greatest fear. I had structured my life around avoiding that outcome, around placating them and buying their conditional love. But hearing the threat now, it sounded different. It sounded hollow, desperate. It wasn't a threat born of wounded love, it was a crude negotiating tactic from a bully who was running out of moves. They weren't threatening to take away their love and support because they had never truly given it unconditionally. They were threatening to take away the obligation, the guilt, the constant demands. And as the initial shock wore off, a strange sense of clarity washed over me. What would my life be like without them? It would be quieter. It would be less stressful. I wouldn't have to screen my calls or brace for an ambush every time the phone rang. I wouldn't have to justify my own financial decisions. I wouldn't have to pour thousands of dollars a year into a black hole of entitlement. The thought wasn't terrifying. It was liberating. "So you're disowning me over a prom dress?" I asked, my voice eerily calm. "We're not disowning you," he said, his voice tight with rage. "You're disowning us. You're making the choice. Your bank account or your family. You have until Friday to transfer the money into your mother's account. I suggest you think long and hard about what you're about to lose." He hung up without another word. I sank onto my couch, the phone slipping from my hand. The line had been drawn, not in the sand, but in concrete. For years, I had been paying for their affection, for my seat at the family table. The price had just gone up, and they had made it clear that my membership was conditional. They had finally put a price tag on my place in the family, $3,500. And looking at it laid out so starkly, I realized what a ridiculously cheap price it was for my freedom. They thought they were cornering me, that they were leaving me with no choice. They had no idea that for the first time in my life, I truly felt like I had won. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. They had started this war, but I was going to be the one to finish it. The weekend loomed, with my father's Friday deadline hanging over my head like a guillotine. But instead of feeling panicked, I felt a strange sense of calm. The ultimatum had, in a weird way, given me permission to stop trying. They had defined the terms of our relationship so clearly that there was no room left for sentimentality. It was a transaction, and I was simply refusing the purchase. To understand why I could even consider this, you have to understand the history. My family wasn't a Rockwell painting. It was a carefully managed business, and I was its most profitable, non-voting shareholder. The dynamic was established early on. I was the responsible one. This label was assigned to me around the age of 8, when I started doing my own laundry because I got tired of having no clean clothes. I learned to cook simple meals because my parents often worked late or were too tired. I helped with homework, I managed my own schedule, and I never asked for much because I could see the constant financial strain they were under. Then, when I was 10, Chloe was born, the miracle baby, the late-in-life surprise. And with her arrival, the entire family structure tilted. My parents, now more financially stable, seemed determined to give her the childhood they felt guilty I never had. But instead of just providing more security, they provided zero boundaries. Chloe never had chores. Chloe never had to wait for anything. If Chloe cried, the world stopped until she was happy again. My role shifted from responsible child to deputy parent and future financier. When I was 16 and got my first job at a local grocery store, my mom borrowed money from my first few paychecks to buy a designer stroller for Chloe. I never saw that money again. When I was in college, working to pay my bills, they'd call and ask me to send money for Chloe's ballet lessons or her new tablet because it's for her education. Each time I complied, I cemented my role. I was the reliable, income-generating utility. My own achievements weren't celebrated as my own, they were seen as a boon for the family. When I graduated with honors and landed my analyst job, their first reaction was, "Congratulations, we're so proud of you." It was my dad clapping me on the back and saying, "Well, looks like we won't have to worry about Chloe's college fund now, will we?" They weren't joking. They had genuinely earmarked my future earnings for their own plans. I remembered one particularly galling incident a couple of years ago. It was my 26th birthday. I had asked for only one thing, a family dinner at my apartment. I wanted to cook for them, to have them in my space, to feel like a real adult in their eyes. They agreed. I spent 2 days cleaning, shopping, and preparing an elaborate meal. An hour before they were supposed to arrive, my mom called. "Honey, we're going to have to cancel," she said, without a hint of apology. "Chloe's friend is having a last-minute pool party and she's just devastated at the thought of missing it. You understand?" I didn't understand. I remember looking at the perfectly set table, the roast in the oven, and feeling utterly invisible. "Mom, it's my birthday," I had said, my voice small. "And you'll have many more," she'd chirped. "Chloe is only young once. We'll celebrate with you another time." They never did. A week later, a generic happy birthday card arrived in the mail with a $20 bill inside. That same week, I found out from a post on social media that they had bought Chloe a $600 ticket to a music festival because she really, really wanted to go with her friends. That was the pattern. My milestones were flexible. My needs were negotiable. My money was communal. Chloe's whims were sacrosanct. This wasn't a family. It was a cult of personality centered around a teenager, and I was the primary benefactor. The prom demand was just the culmination of this lifelong dynamic. It was the most blatant, most expensive, and most entitled request to date. And their reaction when I said no was the final piece of evidence I needed. They didn't reason with me, they didn't try to compromise. They went straight to the nuclear option because, in their minds, I had failed to perform my function. A machine that stops working is no longer useful. As I sat in my quiet apartment, I thought about the one person in my family who had never treated me like an ATM, my grandmother, Mabel, my dad's mom. She was a no-nonsense woman who had seen through her sons and daughter-in-law's act for years. She lived in a small, tidy house back in my hometown and kept to herself, but she and I had always had a quiet understanding. She sent me handwritten letters in college with a $20 bill tucked inside, telling me to buy yourself a treat and don't tell your mother. She was the only one who called on my actual birthday and talked for an hour about my life, my job, my hopes. I hadn't spoken to her since the initial phone call with my mom. I knew my parents wouldn't have told her their side of the story, or if they did, it would be a heavily edited version where I was the villain. I needed an ally, or at the very least, a friendly ear who knew the cast of characters. I picked up the phone and dialed her number. She answered on the second ring. "Mabel's residence," she said, her voice as crisp as ever. "Grandma, it's Ava." "Ava girl, I was wondering when I'd hear from you. Your mother called me yesterday in a right tizzy," she said. "Oh boy," I sighed. "What did she say?" "Oh, the usual," Mabel said with a dry chuckle. "That you were being selfish and ungrateful, that you'd forgotten where you came from. She was laying it on so thick I nearly slipped on the floor. Said you refused to help poor Chloe have one nice night in her life. I figured there was more to it. So, what's the real story?" I explained everything. The $3,500 demand, my $300 counteroffer, the phone call with my dad, and finally, the ultimatum. I laid it all out, the facts, the history, the hurt. She listened patiently, not interrupting once. When I finished, there was a long pause on the line. "Well," she finally said, her voice firm, "it's about time. I was wondering how long you were going to let them walk all over you." The validation in her voice was like a dam breaking. Tears I didn't even know I was holding back started to stream down my face. "So you don't think I'm being selfish?" "Selfish," she scoffed. "Good heave." "NS, no, you're being sensible. Ava, your parents have been using you as a safety net for that child's every whim since you started earning your own money. They've confused a daughter with a grant application. And threatening to cut you out of the family? That's not a family, dear. That's a hostage situation. Don't you dare give them a penny." Her words were like a shield. They strengthened my resolve. "I'm not going to," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "But it's still hard." "Of course it's hard. They're your parents. But you need to see this for what it is. This isn't about prom. This is a power play. They are testing the limits of your compliance, and they've finally found the boundary. Hold it. Do not move an inch." We talked for another hour. She told me stories about my dad as a boy, about how his mother had always bylaid him out of trouble, creating a pattern he was now repeating with Chloe. We talked about my future, about my dream of owning a small house with a garden. She made me feel seen, understood, and supported in a way my own parents never had. When we hung up, the last vestiges of doubt had vanished. The ghosts of past favors and manipulations no longer had any power over me. They were just sad reminders of a role I was no longer willing to play. The deadline was Friday. I was ready. Armed with my grandmother's support, I spent the next 2 days not just waiting for the deadline, but actively preparing for it. My analyst brain kicked into high gear. My parents had presented me with a number, $3,500. It was a figure that felt suspiciously round and conveniently high. They had called it a package deal, which suggested a lack of itemization. If I was going to be disowned over a sum of money, I wanted to know exactly what that money was supposedly for. I decided to do some digging. My first move was purely out of spiteful curiosity. I went online and searched for the top designer dress shops and prom boutiques in their area. Chloe wasn't exactly subtle. She'd been posting obsessively on her social media about her dream prom, tagging specific brands and stores. It took me less than 10 minutes to find the dress she had been posting about. It was indeed a designer gown, beautiful and elegant. It was also priced at $850. Expensive, yes, but a far cry from the thousands I was being quoted for the total experience. So, where was the other $2,650 going? Next, I looked up the cost of prom tickets at her high school. A quick search on the school's website showed that tickets were $125 per person. Let's be generous and say she was paying for her date, so that's $250. The steakhouse she wanted to go to was pricey, but not astronomical. Their prefix prom menu was $80 per person. Again, for two people, that's $160. Limo services in their town ranged from $400 to $600 for a 5-hour prom package. Chloe was splitting it with 3 other couples, so her share would be, at most, $150. Hair and makeup? A high-end salon in the area charged around $200 for a prom package. Shoes and a handbag could easily be found for another $200, unless she was demanding Laubautins, which, knowing Chloe, was a distinct possibility. Let's tally it up. Dress, $850. Tickets, $250. Dinner, $160. Limo share, $150. Hair makeup, $200. Shoes accessories, $200. Total, $1,810. That was a significant amount of money, to be sure. It was still more than I thought was reasonable for a high school dance, but it was nowhere near $3,500. There was a discrepancy of almost $1,700. Where on earth was that money going? The last item on my mom's list had been the after-party hotel suite. This seemed like the most likely place to hide a large cost. I called a few of the nicer hotels in their city, asking about their policies for prom night and the cost of a multi-room suite. The first thing I learned was that most reputable hotels required a guest to be at least 21 to check in and have a major credit card on file for a significant security deposit, specifically to deter underage parties. The second thing I learned was that a large suite would cost around $700 for the night. Even if Chloe was covering the entire cost herself, which was unlikely, the math still didn't add up. I had a feeling the hotel story was a fabrication, a way to inflate the budget and create a sense of urgency. But there was still a huge gap in the numbers. My grandmother, Mabel, provided the missing piece of the puzzle. I called her back and told her my findings. $1,810, you say? She mused. That's still a fortune, but it's not $3,500. Let me make a call. I have my sources. Her sources consisted of a network of ladies she played bridge with, one of whom was a distant cousin of a woman who worked in the administrative office at my mother's company. It was a small-town gossip chain, but it was often more reliable than the evening news. 2 hours later, Mabel called me back. Her voice was grim. "Ava, are you sitting down?" "I am now," I said, a sense of dread creeping in. "Well, my friend heard something interesting. It seems your mother has been complaining to everyone at work about how tight money is, but not because of your father's hours. It's because they just got a bill for some emergency dental work Chloe needed. A root canal and a crown on a molar she cracked eating hard candy." My blood ran cold. How much was the bill? "The procedure wasn't fully covered by their insurance," Mabel continued. "They had to pay a significant amount out of pocket. The final bill, according to what your mother was telling her coworker, was just a little over $1,600. There it was, $1,810 for the prom, plus roughly $1,600 for the dental work. It came out to about $3,410. They had rounded up to a nice, clean $3,500 and presented it to me as the Chloe Prom Experience Fund. They weren't just asking me to fund my sister's extravagant fantasy. They were trying to trick me into paying off their parental financial responsibilities under the guise of a gift for my sister. They had lied, blatantly and shamelessly, creating a fictional budget to cover up their own debts. The lie wasn't just about the money, it was about the intent. They saw me as a solution to their problems, a financial tool to be deployed as needed, without the courtesy of honesty. The rage that filled me was cold and pure. It wasn't the hot, fleeting anger of an argument. It was a deep, structural fury. This deception was a profound betrayal of trust. They had insulted my intelligence, assuming I would just hand over the money without a single question. They had used my sister's happiness as a shield for their own financial mismanagement. This discovery changed everything. My decision was no longer just about refusing to pay for an expensive party. It was now about refusing to be a pawn in their financial games. It was about refusing to be lied to and manipulated by the two people who were supposed to protect and guide me. My father's Friday deadline was the next day. I now had all the ammunition I needed. I wasn't just going to say no. I was going to show them that I knew exactly what they were doing. I spent the rest of the evening preparing, not just emotionally, but financially. I knew that once I dropped this bomb, there would be no going back. The fallout would be immense, and I needed to be ready. The line in the concrete was about to become a chasm, and I was the one holding the dynamite. Friday arrived, not with a sense of dread, but with the electric hum of anticipation. This was it, the day of the reckoning. I woke up early and executed the plan I had formulated the night before. This wasn't just about a phone call, it was about securing my independence permanently. My first step was to build a fortress around my finances. I had a joint savings account with my mother, opened when I was a teenager. It held a small emergency fund of a few $1,000s that I had naively believed was for mutual family crises. I now saw it for what it was, a backdoor into my money. My parents knew about this account, and I had a horrible vision of them somehow trying to leverage it. Before the banks even opened, I was online. I initiated a transfer of every single penny from that joint account into my primary checking account, which was solely in my name. Then, I scheduled the account for closure, the digital equivalent of salting the earth. Next, I went through all my accounts and security settings. I changed my passwords, updated my security questions to things only I would know, no more mother's maiden name or street you grew up on. I also put a verbal password on my bank accounts, ensuring that no one could call in pretending to be me and get any information. It felt like overkill, but given the depth of their deception, I wasn't taking any chances. The final step was symbolic but necessary. I had a credit card where my father was listed as an authorized user. It was from years ago, intended only for dire emergencies. He had never used it, but its existence was another tether. I logged into my credit card portal and with a few decisive clicks, removed him. The last financial link was severed. By 9 a.m., my fortress was complete. I was financially firewalled from my family. Now, all that was left was to wait for the call. It came at 5:01 p.m., just as the business day was ending. It was my dad. His tone was expectant, as if he was a manager calling to see if a simple task had been completed. "Ava," he said, "it's Friday. Did you do the right thing?" I took a deep, centering breath. "I did do the right thing, Dad. I did what was right for me." "What's that supposed to mean?" he asked, a hint of impatience in his voice. "Did you transfer the money to your mother?" "No," I said simply. My voice was calm, devoid of the anger and hurt that had been churning inside me for days. It was the voice of a financial analyst stating a fact. "No money has been transferred." The silence on the other end was heavy. I could practically hear him processing the fact that his authority had been defied. "You're making a very big mistake, Ava," he said, his voice dropping to that familiar, menacing low. "You're choosing money over your family." No, I corrected him. I'm choosing honesty over manipulation, and I'm choosing to protect myself from being used as a secret slush fund. What the hell are you talking about? He blustered. This was the moment. I laid out my findings with cold, methodical precision. I did some research, I began. Chloe's dream dress costs $850. The prom tickets are $250 for two. Dinner is $160. Her share of the limo is, at most, $150. Hair, makeup, and accessories might add another $400 if she's being extravagant. The grand total for the most lavish prom experience imaginable is around $1,800. So I was wondering, Dad, where was the other $1,700 going? He was silent. I didn't wait for an answer. It took me a while to figure it out, but then Grandma Mabel heard a fascinating story. It seems Chloe needed some emergency dental work recently, a root canal and a crown, and the out-of-pocket cost for that procedure was, coincidentally, about $1,600. So you weren't asking me for prom money. You were trying to trick me into paying your dental bills. The silence that followed was deafening. I had him. The bluster, the intimidation, it all evaporated in the face of cold, hard facts. He was speechless. You lied to me, I continued, my voice gaining strength. You and Mom, you concocted a fake budget and used Chloe's happiness as a weapon to guilt me into paying your debts. You didn't even have the decency to be honest and ask for help. You just assumed I was a fool who would hand over thousands of dollars without a second thought. That's insulting, Dad. It's more than insulting, it's deeply dishonest. When he finally spoke, his voice was a choked whisper of rage. You went behind our backs, you talked to my mother. I talked to the one person in this family who has never treated me like a bank, I retorted. The ultimatum you gave me was to pay $3,500 or I'm no longer family. Well, I'm not paying. I am not paying for the prom, I am not paying for the dental bills, and I am not paying for the privilege of being lied to and manipulated anymore. So I guess I have my answer. I am no longer family. You ungrateful, he started, his voice rising into a shout filled with expletives. I cut him off. Don't you dare call me ungrateful. I have been nothing but generous to this family. I have given and given and given, and all you've done is take and expect more. The bank is closed, Dad. The family ATM is officially out of service. Permanently. I could hear my mother in the background now, asking what was going on. He must have put the phone on speaker. She knows, Karen, he yelled. She knows about the dentist bill. My mother's panicked voice came through the line. Ava, honey, it wasn't like that. We were going to tell you, we just didn't want you to worry. The lie was so pathetic, so transparent, it was almost sad. Worry? You weren't trying to save me from worry, Mom. You were trying to pull a fast one. And when I didn't comply, you threatened to disown me. That's the truth, isn't it? They had no answer. There was just sputtering, rage from my father, and panicked excuses from my mother. They weren't angry that I had hurt them. They were furious that I had caught them. This conversation is over, I said, my voice like ice. You made the terms very clear. Pay or I'm out. I'm not paying, so I'm out. Goodbye. Before they could respond, I ended the call. And then I did something I had never done before. I blocked their numbers. My mother, my father, and, for good measure, my sister Chloe. I went to my social media accounts and blocked them there, too. It was a digital excision. A clean cut. I sat in the silence of my apartment, my heart hammering against my ribs. It was done. The fortress was built, the lines of communication were severed, and the war, for now, was over. I didn't know what would happen next, but for the first time, I didn't care. I felt a profound sense of relief, of lightness. I had finally chosen myself. The cost had been the family I thought I had, but I was beginning to realize I had lost nothing of value. I had only lost a liability. The weeks following what I now called the disownment were strangely quiet. I had expected a barrage, an escalation. I imagined them driving to my apartment, sending angry letters, or trying to contact me through other relatives. But there was nothing, just a profound and deafening silence. It was unsettling at first, but it quickly became peaceful. I realized they had no other leverage over me. The money was their only weapon, and I had disarmed them. Without the ability to demand or guilt me, they had nothing to say. My grandmother Mabel kept me in the loop. She reported that my parents were telling everyone in the family a wild, self-serving story. In their version, I was a cold, money-obsessed daughter who had suddenly, and for no reason, cut them off after they had asked for a small, reasonable loan for Chloe's prom. They conveniently left out the $3,500 price tag, the lies about the budget, and the ultimatum. They painted me as the villain and themselves, as the heartbroken, abandoned parents. Some relatives bought it and sent me sanctimonious messages, which I promptly ignored and blocked. Others, who knew the family dynamics better, remained suspiciously quiet, likely waiting to see how things played out. Mabel, however, was my rock. "Let them talk," she'd say. "Truth has a way of coming out, usually at the most inconvenient time for the liars." She was right. The inconvenient time turned out to be the night of Chloe's senior prom. According to Mabel, who got the story in juicy, detailed installments from her gossip network, my parents had been banking on me caving at the last minute. When my Friday deadline passed and no money appeared, they panicked. They didn't have the $1,800 for the prom, let alone the money for the dental bill. But they had already promised Chloe her fairytale night. Backing down would mean admitting to her that they couldn't afford it, and worse, that their primary source of funding, me, had cut them off. Their pride wouldn't allow it. So they scrambled. They put the expenses on a high-interest credit card. The dental bill, the dress, the dinner, the limo, all of it went on plastic. They were determined to give Chloe her perfect night, both to save face with her and to prove to the world, and probably to themselves, that they didn't need me. The day of the prom arrived. Chloe was ecstatic. She posted dozens of pictures on social media. The professional hair and makeup, the ridiculously expensive dress, the group of friends posing by the stretch limo. Her captions were filled with hashtags like Best Night Ever and Prom Queen. I saw them because one of my cousins, who hadn't taken a side, showed them to me. Seeing her so happy, so oblivious to the financial and familial chaos that had funded her evening, didn't even sting. It just felt distant, like watching a movie about people I used to know. The night, however, did not go as planned. The first crack in the facade appeared at the pre-prom dinner. According to one of the other mothers who later complained to Mabel's friend, Chloe and her date had been ordering the most expensive items on the menu, including mocktails and appetizers not included in the prefix meal. When the bill came, there was a significant overage. An argument broke out among the parents who were chaperoning about who should cover the extra cost. My father, apparently, got loud and aggressive, insisting that it's a special night and everyone should just chip in. It created a tense, awkward atmosphere before the kids even got to the dance. The main event, the prom itself, was where things truly unraveled. Chloe had been campaigning hard for prom queen for months. In her mind, the dress, the limo, the whole spectacle was a coronation. It was the grand finale to her perfect high school career. She was so confident she was going to win that she had apparently been insufferable to her classmates for weeks. But she didn't win. The crown went to a quiet, well-liked girl who was captain of the debate team. According to the reports Mabel collected, Chloe's reaction was not graceful. She didn't clap politely. She didn't smile and congratulate the winner. She burst into tears and caused a massive scene in the middle of the dance floor. She accused the winner of rigging the vote, called her friends traitors for not voting for her, and stormed out of the ballroom, her date trailing awkwardly behind her. Her dramatic exit culminated in her tripping on the hem of her own $850 dress, tearing a huge gash in the delicate fabric. The fairytale had officially become a disaster. Her friends, tired of her drama, decided to ditch her. They told the limo driver to take them to the after-party without her. So Chloe, in her torn designer gown, was left stranded at the school with her mortified date, forced to call her parents to come pick her up. My parents, who had been at home basking in the glow of their perceived victory over me, were furious. They weren't furious at Chloe for her behavior. They were furious at the school, at her friends, at the world for not giving their perfect daughter the perfect night she deserved, the night they had gone into debt to provide. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. The next day, my mother received a flood of angry texts from the other parents about the dinner bill and Chloe's behavior. The limo company charged my dad's credit card extra for having to make an unscheduled trip to pick up Chloe and her date. And the credit card bill, with its new multi-thousand-dollar balance, sat on their kitchen table like a ticking time bomb. The night of broken tiaras had ended not with a cherished memory, but with a torn dress, alienated friends, and a mountain of debt. They had tried to buy Chloe a perfect experience, but they had only managed to expose and amplify her entitlement. And they had done it all without me. They had gotten exactly what they wanted. I was not involved. They were solely responsible for the outcome. The silence from their end continued, but now I knew it wasn't the silence of pride. It was the silence of humiliation. The weeks after the prompocalypse, as I privately called it, were transformative for me. Without the constant, low-grade stress of waiting for the next financial demand, it felt like a heavy cloak had been lifted. I was sleeping better. I was more focused at work. I started exploring my own city, trying new restaurants, and reconnecting with friends I had neglected because I was always so drained by my family drama. My relationship with my grandmother, Mabel, blossomed. We spoke on the phone several times a week, and I drove down to visit her every other weekend. We'd sit in her garden, drink iced tea, and she'd tell me stories about her life. She never pried about my parents, but she offered quiet, unwavering support. "You're building your own life now, Ava girl," she told me one afternoon. "On your own terms, that's all a grandmother could ever want to see." During one of those visits, she gave me a stack of old photo albums. As I flipped through the pages, I saw pictures of myself as a little girl, a serious child with big eyes, often standing slightly apart from my parents who were doting on a baby Chloe. Seeing the dynamic laid out in faded photographs was oddly healing. It wasn't my imagination. It had always been this way. I wasn't selfish for wanting to break free. I was a survivor. About 3 months after the prom, I received an email from an unknown address. The subject line was simply, "From your mother." My finger hovered over the delete button, but curiosity got the better of me. The email was a rambling, self-pitying mess. It detailed their financial struggles since I had cut them off. The credit card debt from the prom was crippling them. My dad was having to work overtime, and my mom was looking for a second, part-time job. Chloe was miserable. She had been forced to get a summer job at a fast food raise. Torrent to start paying for her own gas and expenses. She was also now responsible for paying for a portion of her college tuition, something they had always assured her would be taken care of. The email was filled with accusations, how my selfishness had ruined Chloe's future, how I had abandoned them in their time of need. But buried at the very end was the real point of the message. It was a pathetic, half-hearted appeal. "If you could just find it in your heart to help us with a loan," she wrote, "we could get back on our feet. We could try to be a family again." I read the email twice. The first time I felt a faint flicker of the old guilt. The second time I felt nothing but a sad, final sense of closure. They hadn't learned a thing. They weren't apologizing for the lies or the ultimatum. They weren't acknowledging the years of financial and emotional exploitation. They were just trying the same old tactic from a weaker position. They didn't miss me, they missed my money. The offer to be a family again wasn't an olive branch, it was a business proposal. I typed a one-sentence reply. "I wish you the best in managing your finances." Then I blocked the email address and deleted the message. That, for me, was the true end. A year has passed since that last email. I've heard through the grapevine that things are still tough for them. Chloe ended up going to a local community college instead of the 4-year university she dreamed of, a reality check that I can only hope will be good for her in the long run. My parents are still working hard to pay down their debts. They sold the big family car and now share one. They are living with the consequences of their own choices. As for me, I'm thriving. I got a promotion at work. I've been saving aggressively, and my dream of buying a house is closer than ever. Last month, I put a down payment on a small condo in a quiet neighborhood, a place that is all mine, bought with my own hard-earned money. My grandmother Mabel was my first guest. She brought a potted orchid as a housewarming gift. As we stood on my small balcony, looking out at the city, she put her arm around me. "Look what you've built, Ava," she said, her voice thick with pride. "A home, a career, a life. You didn't need them to do it. You did it yourself." I realized she was right. For years, I thought losing my family would be the end of my world, but it turned out to be the beginning. I had lost a toxic obligation, but I had gained a true ally in my grandmother, and more importantly, I had gained myself. I learned that family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about respect, trust, and unconditional love. It's a foundation you build, not a debt you owe. And my foundation was finally and firmly my own.